Good afternoon, Enterprise families. I'm Brian Winstead. I'm superintendent at Enterprise Elementary School District. We're excited to be here tonight for our first parent town hall meeting. As you may have heard, we're planning to open up schools, and I know there's lots of concerns and lots of questions, and so we wanted to come directly to you through Facebook to answer as many of these questions as you have. We have about an hour and a half. And we've actually already had some questions that have been submitted. And so I'd like to introduce to you Heather Armelino. She's our assistant superintendent. And we have a group of individuals here and a group of individuals in the back that are looking at your questions, and they'll be presenting them to us. And so we hope to get as much done as we can in the next hour and a half. So let me introduce Heather Armelino, assistant superintendent.
Hi, everybody. I also want to say that some of our folks who are working with the questions tonight, if there's a question they can answer easily in the chat window, they'll go ahead and do that. So I want to show you, first of all, that what our plan looks like, our cover sheet. This is up on our website, EESD.net, so you can refer to that. And let me start with some of the questions that were submitted early. First question is, will students have recess and PE? And they absolutely will. If so, will they be required to wear masks in the heat while running around? They will not. So there are a couple of times when masks can be removed, and that would be during physical activity and anytime when you're outside and able to be 6 feet apart. Students could remove their masks at that time as well. So that holds true for during PE. So that should eliminate concerns about overheating. We know it's hot here anyway, but they won't have to be running with a mask on. Okay, and I think that I kind of answered this next question. Will kids be allowed to take breaks from wearing masks if needed? Can they step out of the classroom if they need to take their masks off and get fresh air? I would imagine that all of our kids and probably our teachers will need a moment for a breath of fresh air. So yes, we will have those opportunities. And as I mentioned before, there may be times when the whole class goes outside and they're able to space out and can take that mask off for a little bit. The next question is, what will distance learning look like? And I'm assuming that you are referring to the option for staying at home if you're not comfortable sending your child back at the start of the year. We anticipate that this will be a combination of materials that we send home, textbooks and printed materials, as well as some virtual online instruction. We will provide a Chromebook for kids who are staying at home. In the spring, we were able to do one per family, but we're prepared to do one-to-one as we need to for distance learning. And that will be true if the whole district ends up at that on distance learning at some point. We will have Chromebooks for each of our kids to use. So I hope that answers that. What will happen if we choose to start school in one format, either in class or on distance learning, and would like to switch methods of instruction? This could be a little complex. It will depend in part on the number of students that have requested to stay at home. If we have a large number, we may be collapsing some of our in-person classrooms and using those teachers specifically for online learning. So if we have people who want to come back, it will depend on whether we have a spot in a particular classroom. So we'll work with you and try to adjust as we're able. All right, next question is, what happens when children have allergies that look like symptoms? That's also a really great question. In a situation like that, we would be involving our health clerk at our school site, and the health clerk will work with families. We generally know who our students are that may have chronic allergies, and so we'll work together to determine what the root cause is of those symptoms. Another question, will kids be disciplined if they touch or wear a face mask improperly? We anticipate that There will be a little bit of a need for coaching with our students at the beginning of the year. We don't expect them to be perfect, so we'll be working with kids as they get used to this and learn how to do this properly. If it's something that becomes a chronic situation, then we would be talking with a child and involving parents too to see how we can resolve that issue. What if kids have sensitive skin and cannot use hand sanitizer all the time? Will they be allowed to wash with soap and water instead? Yes, absolutely. We would really prefer the use of soap and water whenever possible, but we have hand sanitizer when that could be useful as well. This is a similar question to one I previously answered. What if we want to distance learn for the beginning of the year but put our kids back in school after the holidays? So that may be possible. Again, that's going to depend on whether we have room in a particular class to move those students back. Okay, what does home learning look like? Again, that's a combination of textbook and printed materials as well as some online learning. We will assign a particular teacher to any student who's in the at-home option, so you will have a connection with one instructor, but it could be more than one grade level if we don't have a large number of students participating. What will lunch look like? We're expecting to be able to use our cafeteria. Now, there may be some exceptions where a class may be eating inside their classroom, but for the most part, students will go to the cafeteria with their class, so they stay in that same group. They will sit at a table designated for their class. Their lunch we will not be going through a lunch line and doing any buffet serving. It will be prepackaged and in a brown bag already at the table, so students will come in and sit down, they'll eat together, and they'll be dismissed together as a class to go to recess. But during recess, they will be staying in a designated area with their classmates, so there will not be any mixing with other classes. Could we receive more guidance on face shields? I'm assuming that that is opposed to a face mask. So face masks are the best because they fit tightly around the mouth and nose. If there's a situation where a student might need to use a face shield, I would just speak with your administrator. What is recommended then is that a face shield has a drape so that it protects any air droplets from coming back and forth. All right, the next question I'm going to have our Director of Special Ed come answer. What kind of precautions will be taken for children in a special day class? Annie Payne.
Hi, I'm Annie Payne, Director of Special Ed for the district, and we are going to follow all the precautions that have been outlined by California Department of Public Ed. Those include wearing of face masks or face coverings for grades 3 and up, ensuring social distancing as much as possible, frequent hand washing, and if there are further precautions that any child needs related to their disability or to any specific health need, then we will work with our health staff as well as with the parent and the families to make sure that we're able to accommodate any child's individual and unique needs. Heather?
Thank you. Okay, I skipped a question, so I'm going to scroll back up here. Question, will children be tested for COVID-19 without approval of parents and guardians? No. We will not be testing any children at school. Currently, Shasta County does not really have the capacity to do widespread testing, and we won't be testing students at the school site. All right, let's see. Question is the option of homeschooling and distant learning. Our at-home learning option is somewhat of a combination of those two things. You will have a teacher assigned to your child. There will be some online instruction, but there will also likely be some textbooks sent home and paper, pencil, assignments to complete. We would hope to do either in-person appointments from time to time or virtual appointments so we can involve parents, but there would be some interaction with a teacher that is assigned to that student. How will junior high students transition between classes? We will be limiting the number of transitions that our students would normally have at a junior high. So you will get more information from the principal at your site as to what that looks like. So it may be that their schedule is a little bit different from day to day so that they aren't switching every hour. This next one is a related question. Will middle schoolers have only one teacher switching classes or have any electives? Middle school students should still have the same number of teachers. It will just be a matter of, for instance, they may have math and science on one day and their language arts and history the next day, because that would reduce some of the changing of classes. But they will be able to go out to their PE class. For the most part, we can hold PE outside or in a gymnasium where there's a lot more room. Electives may look a little bit different. Right now, things like band and choir are not permitted in the state of California for the time being. So our teachers are working on being very creative with how we can involve students in music in ways that don't incorporate some of those activities that are considered high risk right now. So we want our students to still have some of those really enriching experiences. We just may have to adapt them a bit. Sports, for the time being, is on hold. We're following more or less what's happening in the high school. And what the high school is saying right now is that fall sports will be delayed to perhaps winter time, and then we'll have to reevaluate the state of affairs at that time. But we will not begin our fall sports at the beginning of this year. Okay, what if we don't want to send kids back right away and want to send them back 2 months after school starts? As I mentioned before, that will depend on how many students we have out on distance learning and whether we have room in our in-person classrooms to bring them back in. So you'll just have to work with your administrator, and we will figure out how to get you back as quickly as we're able to. Will there be after-school programs? Our after-school programs will continue to run much as they have in the past. Students will also have to wear masks just like they do during the school day. We'll do the same protocols for hand washing, and as much as we're able, we'll try to keep kids that were in the same class together during the day in the same group in the after-school program, but there may be somewhat of a different cohort in the after-school time. If a vaccination becomes available, will the district require it? The district actually doesn't make those decisions. That really comes from the state of California. So I couldn't answer that at all, but I would imagine that that would be quite some time before something like that were to happen. So we will just have to wait and see. What will be the process if a child in a classroom has a positive COVID test? If you could run us through a hypothetical situation and what type of testing will be required for classmates, okay? So at this point, we aren't requiring anybody to have a test. If there is a positive case, we are following California's guidance for the Department of Public Health, and this is a public document if you want to look at it, but I can show you, for example, if there is a confirmed COVID-19 case, we would notify public health, or it may be more likely that public health notifies us, and then we would have that particular cohort. So if we're talking about, let's say, a fifth grader is positive, or the fifth grade teacher is positive, that class would be on distance learning for 14 days. And then we would be able to come back as long as that person has met the criteria for returning. And we would do disinfection in between. So we will be communicating with families, but we certainly aren't going to share personal information about who may be sick. Will temperatures be taken at the door? This is a question that we've been working on with public health and our other schools in the county. As you can imagine, this could be quite a cumbersome task in the morning and could create a situation where we have long lines of students waiting to get through a temperature screening. So we are actually asking our families to do that at home, to do a temperature screening and a symptom screening. We have posted some information on that. There are links in our plan with what those symptoms look like. The cutoff is 100.3 fever or higher would be reason to keep a child home. What precautions are being taken for the lower grades that are not required to wear masks? One of the benefits of our lower grades is that there are fewer students in those classrooms, so we will have an easier time of spacing them out a little bit more. The reason that they are not required to wear masks actually, again, comes from public health and their latest information on how low the transmission rate is for the youngest children, and that's the reasoning behind that decision. Are there specific requirements for the type of face mask, or just a face covering in general is okay? All right. This is another thing I have linked in our plan, but what public health has said is a cloth face covering is a material that covers the nose and mouth, and it can be secured to the head with ties or straps or simply wrapped around the lower face, can be made of cotton, silk, or linen, and it can be handmade or made from items like scarves or t-shirts. Will a COVID test be required for all students if someone in the class tests positive or just quarantine? So yes, we will not be requiring a test. If anything about testing changes, that information will come to us from California, but as of now, that's where we are, and that class would be basically learning at home for 14 days. We are told there will be staggered drop-off times. When will we know what time we are supposed to drop off our child? We hope to get that information to you next week, and I do appreciate your patience. As you can imagine, your administrators are working really hard on all of those schedules and the timing and whether there are any adjustments to our bus routes. So as soon as we have that put together, we will share that with you. You'll hear that information from your principal. Will students still have library time? Students will still be able to access the library. This might look a little bit different in that they may just be coming in to check out books and then bringing them back to their class, but they will have access to do that. If children start going back to school and it's too tough to be back with the masks, can they opt to go to home learning? Yes, if we have a spot for them, and I would imagine that we should have some flexibility there, and you'll just work with your school principal and we'll see where we might have a spot for them. Are there medical exemptions for masks? There are some, and there is more information about this in our plan, but if a student has a significant breathing problem that has already been documented, and we may have that information at school, or we have a doctor's note that explains why they cannot have a mask on, then we absolutely would honor that. There could be some other unique situations, but you will work with your site administrator on those things. Are middle schoolers being released at the same time as lower grades? What will dismissal look like for kids with siblings? I'm going to guess you might have a student at a K-8 campus. Those times will be staggered, but we will take into consideration if you have a first grader and an 8th grader and your first grader's dismissal time is earlier, we will allow those older siblings to be dismissed with their younger ones so that you aren't waiting around for 2 different dismissal times. Will the at-home learning option be through the individual school site or through the district's independent study program? We aren't entirely sure yet. That is because we don't know exactly how many of you are going to want that. And thank you for so many of you who have already submitted your survey. We have over 1,000 families, but we know that's maybe a little more than a fourth of all of you. So please make sure you let us know. If we have enough students at a particular school site, then that they would be assigned to a teacher from their school site, and that would be our preference. But there may be a situation where we have to have a teacher cover students from more than one site. Do students eat lunch in class? For the most part, the answer to that is no. They'll be eating in the cafeteria. There may be some exceptions for perhaps preschool or kindergarten, but you'll find out more about that from your school site. Will students be 6 feet apart when eating lunch? They will not, because they will still be within their same cohort. There are some sites that can accommodate some outdoor eating, but most students will be in the cafeteria. I read that there are medical exemptions for masks that require a doctor note. What about families that do not wear masks for religious reasons? My children, okay, I'm going to answer the first part of that question. If you have an objection to wearing a mask, then the simple answer to that is that we would want you to do the at-home learning option. If there is a medical reason, then that is something that we can work on together. My children do not do well with distance learning, and this is the only option I read available. Okay, so if you have a specific situation, I would encourage you to reach out to your school principal to talk about that. If a staff or child have COVID symptoms, how strict will you be at keeping them home, and how long will they stay home once these symptoms have left? This is something that continues to be updated. What I most recently read from the CDC was there was some concern about students missing too much school because we may overreact to symptoms, and as we know, kids get colds and things like that. So this is something we have to continue to work out, and we'll be consulting with public health and with our district nurse so that we can make the best decision here. Is anything being done to reduce the number of students in each class so distancing is more feasible? What our objective is to maximize the space that we have. It may very well be that we have a fewer number of students if we have a large number that are doing the at-home option, but we will weigh if we had to spread out too much, we wouldn't be able to invite everyone back each day. So this is sort of a balancing act that we're having to do right now. And so we're reconfiguring our classrooms the best that we can to maximize the space that's available to us. If the schools get shut down, do we have the option to do actual homeschool versus distance learning? What might be helpful to know is that we learned an awful lot from the 3 months that we did distance learning in the spring. So if we are in that mode again, it will look quite different. And one of those changes will be access to one-to-one Chromebooks and a more school day-like experience with more live interaction and instruction with a teacher. And that doesn't mean that they would have to log on for 6 hours, but there'll be a combination of that every day as well as other assignments to supplement. So that might help you somewhat, but otherwise we can talk about a different option on an individual basis. Whoops, okay. I'm scrolling the wrong way. Okay, I think I'm in the right spot there. What's the illness policy in regards to COVID? If someone needs to be tested or has symptoms, will parents be notified? Well, certainly we will be notifying parents if we think their child is sick. We would only notify a family in a class if we have a confirmed case. And again, we are not going to be requiring testing or conducting any testing at this point. When are site principals going to reach out with site-specific details? You may be hearing some things this week and probably more next week. I know that they are working really hard on hammering out the details of those staggered arrival and drop-off times and working with our transportation as well. So it's taking a little bit of time, but we will get that to you as soon as we possibly can. Is there an option for grade schoolers to do two-time? I'm not sure what that question is asking me.
2 times in person and homeschool the rest.
Hybrid.
Oh, 2 days. Okay, a hybrid. At this point, we are not offering a third option as a hybrid. However, there may be the possibility to have some in-person meetings and some limited in-person instruction if you're on the at-home option. What about parents who may send their kids to school even with a fever? We do have a health clerk at every site, as well as our office staff that are trained as backup. So we're asking our teachers to do an informal symptom check, a visual wellness check as students arrive. If a student appears as though they're not feeling well or reports that they're not feeling well, we will involve our health clerk. And if there's an indication of a fever, we'll ask that those students be picked up. All right, I'm going to have Annie come back and answer a few questions.
Okay, so the first question is, what does speech therapy look like with masks? And we recognize that there will be specific circumstances that will be difficult to utilize masks with, and that includes speech therapy. So we are planning for that. That could include ensuring that the space in which speech therapy is occurring affords 6 feet of distance so that masks aren't worn. That could be the utilization of face shields. But we will work closely with our speech pathologists who are the experts in implementing speech and language services so that we can create an appropriate plan for every kiddo. The next question says, if we choose distance learning option, will we be able to receive RSP, resource services, and or speech interventions via Zoom? Any changes to your child's IEP will be discussed through the IEP process, and we will determine through that process what's the best way for your child to receive those services. We are able to provide those services if the IEP team determines that that's the appropriate method for your child to receive their free and appropriate public education. The next question says, my son is special needs and I was supposed to drop him off in the classroom because he can't go to the class himself. How will that work? We are working really hard to make sure that we are accommodating all of our children's unique needs, including those kiddos in special education. And so I don't have the specifics of every child in regards to what drop-off time and pickup will look like, but we will work collaboratively to make sure that your child has what they need in order to come to school. And I think that is all for me at this moment.
Thank you, Annie. Well, I'm going to try to take over for Heather here a little bit. She's grabbing some water. Let me say these are some great questions, and we really appreciate taking the time to write them out. And a lot of them repeat, and as we said, we've got some people where we're trying to not repeat a lot of the same questions. So let's see what we've got here. And I will, assuming I can do this, right? Oh, maybe not. Other way? So I'm a Mac person and we're not on a Mac here, so I'm in trouble.
Number 111. There you go.
Okay. How will social distancing happen in a preschool classroom if they don't wear masks? What will the preschool classroom look like? Well, much like our K2 classrooms, K3, we have a smaller number of students in the classroom, so they'll be allowed to, just by the fact that there are fewer students, they will definitely be able to distance more. The preschool classroom will look pretty much the same as it does now. You shouldn't see a lot of difference. Of course, there'll be, each preschool classroom has sinks. There'll be lots of hand washing. Toys and things that they're playing with will be cleaned on a daily basis. So it'll pretty much look the same as you see now. How come it's not? Oh, there we go. Okay. Is it possible if they return, can you install hand sanitizers in all classrooms and cafeterias? So, oh, that question looks like it's already been answered. Boy, you can see. What precautions are being taken for sharing crayons, pencils, glues, etc., as such in kindergarten? So what we're doing here is we're asking, every year we have parents that donate. We have our teachers and our principals at each site have a set amount of crayons and glues for each kid or each child. So we're definitely going to continue to do that with extra precaution given so that they do have their own set. If there is any sharing, we've talked to Ron Cushman, who is our maintenance and operation director, who's involved in our safety and cleaning, and we are going to be cleaning classrooms every single day. All high-touch areas will be disinfected, desks, light switches, things of that nature. So we should be okay there. I know last month you guys said classes will be dismissed at different times to avoid large groups of people. Is this still true? And what about the morning time? Yes, it's still true. And as Heather said a little bit earlier, we're still working on those times. But we're going to try to, for example, people that ride the bus may leave a little earlier, so they're not mixing with, again, different groups of kids who are also going in lines where parents are picking them up. So we'll have that out to you. The principals are working on that, and we should have that out to you by next week. Okay. If a student tests positive who rides the bus or attends after-school care, will all classes who had a student on the bus or in the after-school class have to quarantine for 14 days? Now, that's a great question. So what we've done and what the state has said is that the cohort of a classroom, there's definitely a 14-day quarantine period. That's something that we'll definitely look into. Right now we're not getting information from public health that if a student on the bus had COVID-19, that the entire bus would have to quarantine. But that's something that we are literally almost daily in contact with public health, and as that becomes more clear, we'll definitely answer that for you. If we have multiple kids in the same school or different schools in the same district, and there happens to be a positive test in one of their classes, how would you prefer we proceed with that? Does each kid stay home or just the one child whose class tested positive? Well, that's another great question. Right now, so the class, so if the teacher or a student in the class, we know for sure that entire class would be quarantined for 14 days. If there's a sibling also, I think what we would definitely do is we would talk to the parents and we would ask that you would also quarantine the sibling along with the class, just because of the close proximity, obviously, of being in the home learning. So we'll work with you on that, but yes. Is it true that as district classroom sites, is it true that as a district, classroom sites will only be sanitized every 3 days with the new chemical cleaner you are using? You know, that was something that we had, there was a probiotic that we had looked at using, but we have actually changed that, and we will be sanitizing every single day, every classroom. Oh yeah, you know what? Let's have Ron Cushman come up. Ron Cushman is our maintenance and operations director, and he has been in charge of this. And so let's let him answer kind of the whole cleaning procedure, so you can take a look at that.
Thank you, Brian. I'm Ron Cushman. I'm the Director of Maintenance and Operations. What I would say is that we will be disinfecting every classroom on a daily basis. We will be disinfecting high touch points, door handles, light switches, those types of things, more than once on a daily basis. Brian mentioned we'll be using a probiotic. We'll be doing that over the weekend to help assist with the cleaning process. The disinfecting agents that we're using are on the EPA N list, and so they are approved for used for the fight against the COVID. Okay, Heather wants me to do the next one. Have sanitation regulations changed since all this? As I understand, there were restrictions on using like sprays and Lysol, Clorox wipes. Yes, the guidelines that we get change, not hourly, but quite a bit. And so we're adjusting to those changes. And as I just said, we'll be using the disinfectants that are approved by the EPA as far as fighting the COVID. We are considering using the Clorox wipes in the classrooms as well, just as a addition to the cleaning that we use with those disinfectants.
One thing I just wanted to comment on, because the question about staggering arrival and dismissal times has come up a few different times, is that we expect that staggering will be in small intervals. So we're not talking about a long wait period between first and second grade. It will be by a few minutes. So if you have more than one child, it shouldn't hold you up. And also, in terms of the cohort question and a positive case, one of the things that's factored into making that decision, if it's someone maybe not in the actual cohort, is that a close contact is considered someone that you have been with less than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. So that would be considered a close contact. But those are things that we will need public health to help weigh in on as we make those decisions. Will we be able to walk younger students to their classrooms in the morning and meet them in the afternoon for pickup? Certainly, if you're a kindergarten parent, this is going to be a big concern. And so for kindergarten parents in particular, we would invite you to walk your student in. You will need to have a mask on, and we would ask that you keep yourself 6 feet from any other adults on campus, and that you will drop your student off outside the classroom rather than entering the classroom. But we do understand that that may also be true somewhat in first grade, but you'll want to ask your principal in particular about that, or if there is a special circumstance. But in general, we are not going to have visitors on campus or volunteers, and so as much as we love having an open campus and parents coming on, this year will be different because we will be trying to avoid having anyone else on campus other than our students and our staff. Can we get an extension on the survey until we get the specific times from the individual school principal? Hard to choose an option when we're not sure what time we're dropping off and picking up even if they made it into the ACE program. If you need to wait for a little bit longer, go ahead and do that and just contact your principal once you have made that decision. But the more we know now, that really helps us with planning. Can parents donate cleaning supplies for teachers to use? Ron, do you want to answer this one?
Thank you, Heather. I guess the answer would be yes. Those types of products can be used to do general cleaning in the classrooms, and so I'm sure the teachers would appreciate that. In addition to that, our staff will be disinfecting the classrooms on a daily basis, and those are different types of chemicals that we use to disinfect as opposed to the Clorox wipes and the sanitizers that you're referring to. So the answer is yes, feel free to do that, but that will not negate our ability to disinfect classrooms.
If our child does distance learning this year, will they lose their spot, or will they be able to return to an on-site learning next year if things have improved? We would anticipate that you would still have your spot when you return next year. So yes. What happens when a teacher is out? Well, you have roaming subs who go from class to class. I'm sure there will be instances when we will need substitute teachers. Typically, they won't be roaming from one class to the other, but they may come into a particular class if a teacher is sick. And again, all staff on campus will be in masks, and they are asked to maintain 6 feet from students as much as they're able to. That isn't always possible. If we mark yes on our survey to attend school in person by Friday, is that set in stone, or can we change? Oh, that was already answered, so I will skip that one. What happens on rainy days with giving teachers breaks and lunches? Well, this really I don't expect will be any different than what we have normally done on rainy days. Usually kids are finishing their lunch in the cafeteria and then going back to their classroom for some playtime, and we have our aides that help supervise. So that shouldn't be any different. What does the first day of school look like for those of us with smaller children? Kindergarten and second grade, I'd like to be able to see where their classrooms are and meet their teachers. And I will ask that your principals communicate with you what that would look like. I think that's a reasonable request when you have young children, to be able to walk them in on that first day. Again, you would need to have a mask in order to do that. Okay, we have an IEP question for Annie.
Okay, so the question asks, what if your child's IEP will not be redone until 2021? Are we able to request changes before our yearly review if we are choosing an in-home learning option? Absolutely. As a parent, you can always request an IEP, and we will work with you to schedule that as quickly as possible.
If we choose distance learning, do we keep the Chromebooks we already have? That was already answered, sorry. How about cross-contamination with ACE students using classrooms after regular classes leave? Will you be disinfecting before ACE students enter a new classroom? And is the ACE classroom disinfected after ACE students? So Ron can come and stop me if I'm not answering this correctly, but disinfecting a room does take quite a bit of time. So that would be done after students have left that classroom. As I noted earlier, for the most part, we will keep the same students in the same group as much as we can, so they will be also using the same classroom, but there may be a degree to which there's a different cohort happening after school. We're trying to minimize that as much as possible, but it's not going to be 100%. In the cafeteria, will they be spaced in the cafeteria, and will tables be sanitized in between classes? There will be spacing between classes. Cohorts will stay at the same tables together. We are spacing out lunch in general over a much longer period of time so that we can spread out in the cafeteria and not have a crowded situation. So lunch is probably going to be starting quite a bit earlier and going quite a bit longer than it has in years past in order to do that. But those tables will be cleaned in between classes, absolutely. Can parents sign a disclosure of some sort releasing the school from liability and allowing their child to not wear a mask? No. What about shared bathrooms? Our bathrooms will be sanitized once a day at least. We will be encouraging our students to wash hands after using the restroom. On our campuses in general, bathrooms are sort of by grade level or by a couple grade levels in areas, so they aren't necessarily used by every student on the campus, but there definitely will be some sharing of bathrooms unless you're in some primary classes that might have their own restroom. What happens if someone in the front office tests positive? Does the whole front office quarantine? And is there documentation of visitors to see if others were exposed? Well, I'll answer that in reverse. We aren't allowing visitors at this point. If there is someone that needs to be on campus, we always have a record of who's come on campus. And as far as the positive test, I'll kind of refer back to what I said earlier. A close contact is someone who you have been less than 6 feet with for more than 15 minutes. So that would probably be the parameter by which we would determine whether everyone in the office needed to go home. Are you still doing kindergarten roundup on August 6th? That will occur by site, and so again, you're going to watch for that communication from your principal. There may be some virtual visits for a kindergarten classroom, or in some cases, some staggered appointments so that we can have smaller groups of people coming in, but we do want to help your child feel comfortable coming to their first day of school. Is there any concern about the bus ride with mask wearing in the sense of it being too hot? One of the things that we're attempting to do is to keep windows open partially in the bus just to help circulate air. You know, I'm not sure, I can't answer the question as to whether we have any buses with air conditioning right now. I'm not sure about that. And I expect that it's going to be hot, but we hopefully can alleviate some of that with windows down. Can you do distance learning if you are on an out-of-district transfer? If you are here on an inter-district transfer, we consider you our student and we're going to take care of you the same way. If a student has to quarantine because of a sibling, are they then allowed to do temporary distance learning and not counted as absent? Yes, we will have to make that available to students if they're in quarantine. Why are students not required to wear a medical grade mask? Material made from cotton and silk lets the virus through. What we are following is our public health guidelines, and their recommendation has been that unless you are in a medical facility, you wouldn't be wearing a medical grade mask, and that the cotton does do a good job of reducing that, especially when both people are wearing it. How will school drop off and pickup work? Most concern with regard to the youngest grades. That's really going to be a site-specific question. Is it possible, if students return, that you can install hand sanitizer in all classrooms and cafeteria? We have the ability to have hand sanitizer in every classroom and also access to washing your hands with soap and water, which would be our first choice, but we will have that available. If a child is unable to tolerate a mask, what would be the recommendation? I think that might depend on the nature of that child's situation. So I would contact your school principal to discuss that further. How about children who use counselors and or a sensory room? Are those closed down too? Sometimes they are good for mental health. Counselors may have a much easier time socially distancing in a room. So anytime a student might be in a situation where they're not in their cohort, that would be a time where we would want to ensure that not only they have a mask, but that we have extra space in those situations. But just like other shared materials, we're going to minimize the use of shared materials unless we're able to clean them in between uses. So there may be some things that could be set aside for a particular student. How many students per classroom? That is the same as it has been. So no changes to our class size limits. And I have another question for Annie.
So the question is, are special day classes going to be open? And the answer is yes. Our special day classes are going to be open for our students. Scrolling down, do we want to go to this next? So Ron, are you okay?
So we mentioned a couple minutes ago using probiotics as a cleaning solution, and I was asked to talk a little bit about that. So I'll give you the 2-minute rundown of what that means and how it works. I want to start off by saying I am not a microbiologist. I'm an engineer. So I look at things a little bit different than the microbiologists. But I listen to microbiologists, and this is what they have told me. Viruses, germs, bacteria are all bad for us. There are disinfectants and sanitizers that are made through chemicals that help kill those. And that's basically the difference between killing the virus or the germs and dismembering the viruses or the germs. The probiotic is a natural way to clean the classroom. It attacks the area 2 different ways. It will clean the surface with all the organic material that is there that attracts germs and so forth. So it eats that up. So the surface is no longer susceptible to those type of things. In a virus situation, many viruses find their way underneath what is called a biofilm, and that is just a extra protective layer that viruses create. An example of that would be if you took your desk and you put a piece of saran wrap on it. That would be a biofilm on a microscopic level, microbiological level. The probiotics eat through that biofilm and then eats the portions of the viruses and make them unable to look for their host. So it's a natural way to attack this. You will not find it on the EPA end list. That is because it is a natural occurring cleaning as opposed to a chemical cleaning. It's all biology. We will be using the probiotics in the classrooms. What we will be doing, we'll be misting each classroom Friday night and allowing those probiotics to work over the weekend up until Monday when we're disinfecting those classrooms. So we're using a combination of both the disinfectants and the probiotic to keep the classrooms clean. I am now going to turn it over to Heather.
Okay. What about bus transfers? I may not have enough information to answer this question other than to say that you will have information from our transportation department about those specifics. Will distance learning be graded? Will students know if they are doing the work incorrectly? Yes. This will be a much more rigorous process than it may have been in the spring. The work in distance learning will be equivalent to what they would be getting during the school day, and it will be graded accordingly. Now, we may have some grace there in terms of things being the opportunity to resubmit work or to have some extra time if needed, but yes. So there will be no lockdowns at all if any positive tests occur. I am assuming you mean by lockdown that we would be going on distance learning. What the guidelines in public health are telling us is that if we had multiple classes at a school site, then we may have that school go on distance learning, or if we had multiple schools within our districts may go out on distance learning. And as you've heard me say before, if our county moves to the watch list, that would be another reason that we could end up on distance learning altogether. Will teachers or staff be talking about or teaching anything about COVID? Yes. We want to have those conversations with kids. Number one, information is power. We don't want to be afraid. We want to know as much as we can. And parents, I've also included some links about talking to your child about COVID. And part of that involves just teaching them about proper hygiene and how to properly wash hands and why we do that frequently and why we're wearing face masks. Can we receive paperwork for our children instead of the Chromebooks for work? I would think that that's a reasonable accommodation that we could make. You may want to do some of the Chromebook piece just for the to have some daily interaction, but that's something that we can work out with you. With all the health regulations, are schools prepared for lockdown and fire drills? Yes, we are. Lockdowns really won't be any different because in a lockdown, they stay in their classroom, so they aren't mixing with cohorts. And when it comes time to do a fire drill, again, you're staying with your class, so we would do that in a way that we aren't mixing with any other classes. That's pretty orderly experience anyway. Is it possible the whole school would go on distance learning if there was a high amount of COVID? Is there a number the district is looking at in which the whole school would go on distance learning? So again, the number one would be if Shasta County ends up on the watch list, which we want to all keep doing everything we can to prevent that from happening, but that is a possibility. I can tell you what the guidelines right now in public health are. If 25% or more of our schools have to be closed, then we would probably close as a district. If that were to happen, there's the possibility that it would be just for 14 days and we would be able to reopen. But again, this is a dynamic situation and we will be in constant communication with public health to make the best decision we can. Will the whole school be notified when specific classes quarantine or only those affected? There's no reason why we couldn't communicate that with the whole school family. I would imagine that that's something that people would want to know. And I think that may be my last question. Did I miss any? Okay, so just in closing, I'm sure you can imagine that this is the decisions we're making right now weigh heavily on all of our hearts and minds, and to be truthful, are a bit excruciating. And we're really trying to balance what is not only safe and with the needs of our students and wanting to be here for your families. We appreciate our teachers, and we want to do everything that public health is asking us to do so that we can reopen safely, and we are committed to doing that. We also will have some options for some of our teachers who may have health issues or maybe in an at-risk group to be those who can help us with the at-home learning option so that we can all help each other. I know that there are maybe a number of comments that are coming up on this feed right now. So I want you to know that we care about your children, your family. We care about our staff members very deeply. And this is a dynamic and ever-changing situation. And as we learn more, we will do better. But our commitment is to do the very best that we can for our children.
Thank you, Heather. Well, that's it for tonight. We sincerely want to thank all of our families and parents for all the questions. Looks like we answered a little over 200 questions, and I know that there may still be some unanswered questions as we move forward. You know, things are changing. We are constantly monitoring what public health is telling us, and so I want you to be reassured, parents and families, that we are doing exactly what the state is requiring of us, both the governor and public health. And we will make sure that your kids are absolutely as safe as we can possibly make it. Our employees are safe, and yet opening schools up too. If we do go on the watch list, we have no choice. We would go into a distance learning mode. And so we will continue to update you. We're looking at very possibly doing another family parent town hall meeting. And so we will let you know. I think I do want to thank everyone that was here, from our special ed director, Annie, and Heather, our assistant superintendent, and Ron, and all the people in the background that have been feeding us the questions and trying to do the best that we can. So thank you. It's going to be an amazing school year, and we're looking forward to seeing your kids and getting them back on campus. So thank you. Have a great night, Enterprise.